Most men will never admit this, but Nietzsche saw it with terrifying clarity. Weakness does not disappear just because you hide it. It mutates, it disguises itself, it puts on a costume. And the most common disguise, the most socially acceptable and celebrated one, is the mask of the good man. The agreeable man, the harmless man, the man who smiles even when he is dying inside, the man who says yes because he fears what would happen if he ever dared to say no. Nietzsche believed that beneath this mask lies a truth most people are too afraid to confront. Weak men do not become angels. They do not become saints. They do not become moral heroes. They become performers, actors. They pretend to be good because they have no power to be anything else. And in that pretense, they convince themselves that cowardice is compassion, that fear is virtue, that submission is moral superiority. He warned that this illusion is not harmless. It is corrosive, because a man who cannot face his own weakness must invent a story in which his weakness is a sign of purity. And once he believes that story, he becomes trapped, not by the world, not by fate, not by other people, but by the lies he tells himself to survive. This is the forbidden truth Nietzsche pointed at. When a man calls himself good, you must ask whether he means good or safe, whether he means virtuous or powerless, whether he chooses goodness, or whether goodness is the only mask he can wear without being exposed. And if you feel a sharp sting hearing this, it is not an attack. It is a mirror Nietzsche held up to humanity, and one that many men still refuse to look into. To understand why Nietzsche spoke so violently against the illusion of the good man, you must understand the world he came from and the battles he fought within himself. Friedrich Nietzsche was not born into power. He was not a conqueror, not a warrior, not a politician, not a man of extraordinary physical strength. He was a fragile scholar plagued by illnesses that left him bedridden for days, blinded by migraines, isolated from the world, and forced to confront the deepest brutality of human existence, while his body betrayed him again and again. But his weakness did not break him. It sharpened him. It carved him into something rare, a man who saw into the soul of society and refused to look away. He lived in a Europe that celebrated obedience, conformity, politeness, humility, traits that looked like virtue but, in Nietzsche's eyes, were symptoms of spiritual decay. He saw a culture that praised meekness and called it goodness, that punished strength and called it evil, that encouraged men to suppress their instincts until they became hollowed-out versions of what they were meant to be. He watched moral systems built on guilt and shame turn people into sheep who confused obedience with character. Nietzsche's rebellion was not against morality itself. It was against counterfeit morality, the kind that teaches a man to shrink himself and then applaud his own shrinking. He saw how societal rules were often invented by the powerless to restrain the powerful, how morality could become a weapon used not to uplift humanity, but to keep everyone equally weak, equally harmless, equally unthreatening. It is this world, a world still very much alive today, that shaped Nietzsche's obsession with authenticity, strength, self-overcoming, and brutal honesty. He believed that every man faces a crossroads, to rise above his weakness through transformation, or to hide it through moral performance. One path creates a creator, a force of nature, a man who shapes his own destiny. The other path creates a ghost who calls himself good because he lacks the courage to become great. Nietzsche's ideas are still dangerous today because they expose the quiet lie so many men depend on. They reveal that the problem is not society, not fate, not enemies, not bad luck. The problem is the mask of goodness worn so tightly that a man forgets who he is without it. This is why Nietzsche matters now more than ever, because modern life encourages men to be polite instead of real, agreeable instead of strong, morally harmless instead of morally conscious. And Nietzsche, this sick, lonely, brilliant philosopher, dared to ask a question that still terrifies the world. What happens when a man stops pretending? Nietzsche's central idea, the one that sits at the heart of this entire discussion, is brutally simple. People do not become moral because they are strong. They become moral because they are weak, and then convince themselves that weakness is a virtue. He called this the slave morality, not because he was talking about historical slavery, but because he believed most people created values that justified their own powerlessness. When a person cannot win by strength, they redefine strength as evil. When they cannot assert themselves, they redefine submission as kindness. When they cannot change their life, they redefine endurance as noble suffering. This was Nietzsche's unsettling claim. Many of the traits society praises are not signs of goodness at all. They are signs of fear disguised as ethics. To understand this idea, imagine a man who has never learned how to speak up for himself. He avoids confrontation, avoids conflict, avoids expressing his desires. When someone disrespects him, he smiles and says it is fine. When a partner treats him poorly, he swallows the pain and calls it patience. When life demands that he take risks, he retreats and calls it wisdom. Over time, he begins to believe that his silence is compassion, that his inability to act is emotional maturity, that his refusal to set boundaries is saint-like tolerance. But beneath this mask, a different truth grows quietly, almost invisibly. Resentment, bitterness, jealousy, a sense of being overlooked, unappreciated, unnoticed. He begins to resent those who act with confidence, who pursue what they want, who live boldly, not because they are wrong, but because they are free in ways he is not. Nietzsche believed this dynamic shaped entire cultures. Those who felt powerless created moral codes that punished power and rewarded weakness. They taught that ambition was arrogance, that assertiveness was aggression, that confidence was ego, that striving for more was sinful. These values were not created to uplift humanity, Nietzsche argued. They were created to protect fragile egos. Instead of learning how to become strong, people tried to make strength look dangerous. To Nietzsche, this was a tragedy, but an avoidable one, because weakness in itself was not the problem. Every human being begins as something incomplete. Every person faces insecurity, fear, doubt, hesitation. But transformation becomes impossible when weakness is glorified. A man who believes his avoidance makes him virtuous will never step into discomfort. A man who romanticizes his self-sacrifice will never learn self-respect. A man who convinces himself he is good simply because he never asserts himself will never discover who he actually is. Nietzsche used the metaphor of the herd to describe this phenomenon. The herd values safety over growth, comfort over courage, sameness over individuality. The herd avoids all challenges and then calls those challenges immoral. The herd encourages obedience not because obedience makes men noble, but because obedience keeps the herd comfortable. And in that environment, the man who dares to think for himself, who dares to carve his own path, is seen as dangerous. The most dangerous man in a herd is not the strongest. It is the man who refuses to pretend. Nietzsche contrasted the herd with the idea of the Ubermensch, the higher man not defined by the domination of others, but by the domination of himself. A man who does not pretend to be good. A man who confronts his own darkness instead of projecting it onto others. A man who creates his own values instead of inheriting the values of the fearful. A man who transforms weakness into power through effort, discipline, and honesty. This self-overcoming, not physical strength, not arrogance, not cruelty, was Nietzsche's true ideal. And it begins with one terrifying act, telling yourself the truth about who you are. To see how Nietzsche believed this process unfolds, imagine another man, one who does not hide from the reality of his limitations. He sees that he fears confrontation, and instead of calling it kindness, he calls it what it is, fear. He notices his jealousy, and instead of calling it moral judgment, he admits it comes from insecurity. He recognizes his resentment, and instead of blaming others for his unhappiness, he asks why he feels powerless. This honesty breaks the illusion, and once the illusion is broken, transformation becomes possible. Nietzsche believed that every man has the potential to step out of the shadow of the herd and into his own becoming. But that step requires a brutal kind of courage, the courage to stop pretending to be good and start becoming real. He believed that morality built on fear leads to stagnation, but morality built on self-awareness leads to growth. Real goodness, he argued, is not the result of compliance. It is the result of mastery. A man who has confronted his impulses, wrestled with his insecurities, faced his fears, that is a man who can act with true integrity. He chooses compassion intentionally, not because he is afraid of conflict. He chooses honesty consciously, not because he fears disapproval. He chooses responsibility willingly, not because he wants to be praised. This distinction is what Nietzsche devoted his life to revealing. Weakness pretending to be goodness is the root of resentment. Strength choosing goodness is the root of greatness. To Nietzsche, the mask of goodness is fragile, and the moment life becomes difficult, the mask cracks. The quiet man who once called himself gentle becomes bitter. The agreeable man becomes vindictive. The submissive man becomes controlling in passive, indirect ways. When a man cannot express his courage outwardly, it festers inwardly, and that festering turns goodness into something poisonous. This is why Nietzsche urged men to confront themselves honestly, not to become tyrants, not to dominate others, but to stop living inside illusions that protect the ego while suffocating the soul. Every man faces this crossroads sooner or later, to pretend to be good or to become whole, to hide from his nature or to understand it, to follow the herd or to carve his own path. Nietzsche believed this choice determines everything: character, destiny, relationships, purpose. And the question he leaves us with is painfully direct. Are you acting from strength or hiding behind virtue because you fear what strength requires? When Nietzsche spoke about weak men hiding behind the mask of goodness, he wasn't describing a distant past or a forgotten era. He was describing a psychological pattern that still governs modern life. You can see it in workplaces, in relationships, in friendships, in family dynamics, in the digital world, and even in the way people talk about morality today. The costume has changed. The technology has changed. But the psychology, the instinct to disguise fear as virtue, remains exactly the same. Look at modern relationships. Many men today confuse passivity with kindness. They think being easy to handle makes them noble. They believe that avoiding conflict will make people appreciate them. They imagine that saying whatever you want will earn them loyalty. But beneath that polite exterior is a quiet hunger for validation, a hope that by being harmless, they will be chosen. Nietzsche warned that this strategy is doomed from the start, because women do not bond with fear. They do not admire self-erasure. They do not trust men who cannot make decisions or stand by their own desires. A man who cannot risk displeasing someone will eventually become invisible to them. This is why so many modern men feel blindsided when they are rejected. They think they were doing everything right. They were agreeable, supportive, accommodating. What they don't realize is that they were not seen as good, they were seen as weak. And weakness, no matter how politely it is packaged, never feels safe. Nietzsche would say the problem is not that these men are kind. It's that their kindness is a disguise for insecurity rather than a product of strength. The same dynamic appears in the workplace. Many men remain silent in meetings not because they have nothing to say, but because they fear being wrong. They avoid asking for promotions not because they are satisfied, but because they fear rejection. They let others take credit for their ideas, not out of humility but out of resignation. Then they tell themselves they are being team players. They call their avoidance professionalism. They dress up fear and present it as maturity. Nietzsche would have called this the morality of the herd, the collective agreement to choose safety over truth and then pretend the choice is noble. Modern society encourages this more than ever. Social media rewards outrage without action, signaling without effort, performance without substance. A man can appear virtuous with a single post. He can appear wise with a single quote shared online. He can appear confident with a single edited image. The digital world has become a playground for masks, a place where weakness can be polished until it looks like conviction. But underneath the surface, nothing has changed. The man still fears confrontation. He still avoids responsibility. He still cannot bear the discomfort of becoming someone stronger. Nietzsche believed that the greatest danger for modern men is not physical hardship, but psychological comfort. When life becomes easy, the instinct to hide weakness grows stronger. Men learn how to avoid challenges so well that they start believing avoidance is a moral accomplishment. They convince themselves they are too enlightened to engage in struggle, too evolved to assert themselves, too spiritual to desire power over their own lives. Nietzsche would call this a spiritual sedation, a self-inflicted numbness that robs potential and rewards compliance. You can see this sedation in how men respond to suffering. When a man feels lost or defeated, modern culture offers him comforting narratives that tell him he is fine exactly as he is. But Nietzsche believed the truth is almost always the opposite. A man who feels lost is being called to grow. A man who feels rejected is being invited to examine himself. A man who feels powerless is being shown where he must begin the work. But because pain feels threatening, many men seek relief instead of transformation. They rationalize their stagnation. They tell themselves they are calm, patient, spiritual, emotionally intelligent, when secretly they are simply avoiding the discomfort of change. Nietzsche would say that suffering becomes meaningful only when it is used as fuel. Pain ignored becomes weakness. Pain confronted becomes strength. Modern men, however, are often encouraged to numb their suffering rather than analyze it. They are told to escape into fantasy worlds, entertainment, distraction, addictions, instead of facing the raw truth that their lives are not what they want them to be. And when a man cannot face the reality of his dissatisfaction, he cannot rise above it. This avoidance also appears in the way many men seek love or validation. A man who feels unseen tries to compensate by being overly nice. A man who feels insecure tries to earn affection by being endlessly available. A man who fears abandonment tries to prevent it by sacrificing his own identity. But Nietzsche would say this is emotional slavery, a form of self-erasure disguised as loyalty. A man who does not know his own value cannot offer genuine connection. He can only offer himself as an emotional servant, and sooner or later, he resents the very people he tries to please. Society reinforces this in subtle ways. It praises men for being good, safe, supportive, unthreatening. But Nietzsche would ask, supportive of what? Good according to whom? Safe at the cost of your own voice. He believed that real goodness cannot exist without strength. Integrity has no meaning if it is not chosen consciously. Kindness has no value if it comes from fear. Love has no depth if it is built on self-abandonment. There is another angle Nietzsche forces us to confront: how weakness makes you a target. In a world where competition is disguised behind smiles, where ambition hides behind politeness, where people rarely show their true intentions, weakness becomes obvious to predators. It becomes visible in your posture, your eyes, your silence, your decisions. And modern society, no matter how civilized it pretends to be, still operates on ancient instincts. The strong seek opportunity. The weak signal availability. A man who refuses to defend his boundaries will always attract those who want to exploit the undefended. This exploitation does not always look violent. Often, it is subtle. A boss who overworks you because you never say no. A partner who takes advantage of your fear of conflict. Friends who only call you when they need something. Strangers who sense uncertainty and mirror it back to you. Nietzsche believed that weakness is not just a condition, it is a message the world hears and responds to immediately. But he also believed that this message can be rewritten. Modern life is full of opportunities to strengthen the self. Strength does not mean aggression, nor domination, nor emotional coldness. Strength, in Nietzsche's world, means the ability to face discomfort without collapsing, the ability to act without waiting for approval, the ability to know what you value and hold to it, the ability to confront your darker impulses and reshape them rather than hide them. Strength is the foundation upon which real goodness can stand. And this is where Nietzsche becomes relevant in the deepest way. He forces modern men to see how their psychological habits shape their entire destiny. The man who hides weakness will remain imprisoned by it. The man who confronts weakness can transform it. The man who pretends to be good will always resent his own life. The man who strives to become strong can choose goodness freely, and that choice has meaning. Nietzsche's message is not a call to harden your heart. It is a call to awaken, to see the ways you shrink yourself, to see where you lie to yourself, to see how often you hide behind a morality that keeps you small. He asks you to stop performing and start becoming, to stop pretending and start transforming, to stop seeking approval and start seeking truth. And in this modern world, flooded with distraction, comfort, noise, illusion, his challenge is more relevant than ever. Are you living as a man of strength, or a man hiding inside the costume of goodness? If Nietzsche were alive today, he would not give soft advice. He would not tell you to journal your feelings or repeat affirmations or wait for the universe to send you a sign. He would speak to you the same way he spoke to himself, with sharp honesty, with uncomfortable clarity, with a demand for self-overcoming. His lessons were not meant to soothe you. They were meant to break the illusions that keep you weak. And once those illusions are shattered, a different kind of man can finally emerge. His first lesson would be simple. Stop pretending that avoidance is goodness. Every time you stay silent to keep the peace, every time you swallow your truth to avoid discomfort, every time you choose safety over honesty, you carve out a smaller version of yourself. Cowardice does not become virtue just because you've learned to smile while practicing it. Nietzsche would tell you to speak even when your voice shakes, because the act of speaking will strengthen you in ways silence never will. His second lesson would cut even deeper. Resentment is the shadow of the man who refuses to grow. When you hide your weakness behind moral language, resentment festers. You begin to envy the confident, judge the ambitious, criticize the courageous, not because they are wrong, but because they expose everything you wish you could be. Nietzsche believed that resentment is the most poisonous emotion a man can carry, because it convinces him to blame the world for the life he built through fear. The cure is not more virtue, it is transformation. Another lesson Nietzsche would insist on is the necessity of confrontation, not violent confrontation, but existential confrontation. You must confront your own desires, your own envy, your own failures, your own potential. Do not call your laziness humility. Do not call your mediocrity balance. Do not call your fear compassion. The moment you stop lying to yourself, your life will shift. Nietzsche believed self-honesty is the beginning of all strength because it destroys the comfortable illusions that keep men trapped. Then he would tell you something most men never hear. Do not strive to be harmless. Harmlessness is not virtue, it is impotence. A good man is not one who lacks the capacity for harm. A good man is one who has mastered that capacity and chooses restraint. If you cannot say no, your yes has no meaning. If you cannot defend yourself, your kindness has no depth. If you cannot confront others, your peace is merely avoidance. Nietzsche believed strength does not corrupt goodness. It gives goodness its spine. Another lesson would challenge the modern world directly. Stop seeking approval from the herd. When you shape yourself to be liked by everyone, you lose yourself. When you make decisions based on applause, you become a performer instead of a person. Nietzsche urged men to walk paths that others could not understand, because greatness is always misunderstood in its early stages. If the herd praises you too easily, it means you have betrayed something inside yourself. He would also warn you about the dangers of comfort. Comfort is the slowest poison. It numbs ambition. It dulls the instincts. It stretches a man so thin that he forgets what he once wanted. Nietzsche saw comfort as the silent killer of potential. He believed men must seek friction, challenges, goals, struggles, not because suffering is noble, but because it shapes you into someone capable of bearing the weight of your own destiny. Nietzsche would also speak of responsibility. Not the responsibility society assigns you, but the responsibility you choose for yourself. The responsibility of becoming who you could be. He believed that most men avoid responsibility not because they are lazy, but because responsibility forces them to confront their unrealized potential. When you accept responsibility for your desires, your failures, your future, something powerful happens. Your life becomes yours again. Another vital lesson: what you refuse to confront will eventually control you. The anger you suppress will turn into quiet resentment. The dreams you ignore will turn into regret. The insecurity you hide will shape every decision you make. Nietzsche believed that unexamined emotions become invisible masters. They pull the strings while you pretend to be in control. To reclaim your life, you must drag these hidden forces into the light. Finally, Nietzsche would leave you with a truth that is both a warning and a promise. You do not become strong by thinking about strength. You become strong by choosing difficult things on purpose, by doing what scares you, by saying what needs to be said, by becoming someone who cannot be manipulated by fear. Strength grows through action, not intention. And once you develop it, the mask of goodness becomes unnecessary. Your goodness becomes real because it is chosen freely, not used as a shield. All of Nietzsche's lessons converge into one ultimate command: overcome yourself. Not the world, not other people, not your enemies, yourself. The smallness inside you, the fear inside you, the illusions inside you, the false morality you hide behind. When you overcome yourself, the man you become no longer needs validation, permission, or approval. He no longer pretends to be good. He acts with integrity because it is an expression of his strength, not a cover for his weakness. And that is where Nietzsche's philosophy becomes liberating, because he is not asking you to become a tyrant. He is asking you to become whole, not to dominate others, but to dominate the parts of you that keep you from becoming who you were meant to be. Nietzsche's truth is merciless, and it should be. The world is merciless. Life does not care whether you hide your fear behind a smile or a moral code. Every moment you pretend to be good because it is safe is a moment stolen from the man you could have become. Weak men cloak themselves in virtue, and the world applauds. But beneath the applause lies nothing but emptiness, a slow corrosion of potential and spirit. Nietzsche would remind you that the mask is fragile. One challenge, one confrontation, one unavoidable crisis, and it will shatter, leaving only bitterness, resentment, and regret. The haunting reality Nietzsche forces us to face is this: the life of pretense is a prison. Every compromise, every avoidance, every false morality builds walls around your soul. You may feel comfortable inside those walls, protected from the judgment of others and from the sting of failure. But comfort is a cage. And the longer you stay, the more your essence atrophies. The man who hides from his own nature will never rise. He will never be admired. He will never love fully. He will never live fully. And yet he will convince himself he is good, noble, even enlightened, while the world moves past him. Nietzsche leaves us with one final, unflinching choice: continue pretending or confront yourself with absolute honesty. To be honest is to strip away every mask, to acknowledge every fear, every failure, every envy, every suppressed desire. It is to face the raw material of your own soul and say, "This is who I am, and I will either master it or remain enslaved to it." To choose honesty is terrifying. To choose courage is often lonely. But it is the only path to becoming a man of real power, real integrity, real presence. Pretending to be good may protect you for a time. It may shield you from conflict, from rejection, from discomfort. But Nietzsche knew, and history proves, that what is hidden will eventually rise and it will demand its due. Weakness, when denied, does not vanish. It festers, and it eventually controls the life it once could not. The good man in pretense is doomed to become the tyrant of his own emotions, the prisoner of his own illusions, the casualty of the life he refused to fight for. Real goodness, Nietzsche tells us, is not born from fear, avoidance, or societal applause. Real goodness is a choice. It is a strength exercised. It is the triumph of self-mastery over self-deception. And it begins with one terrifying, liberating act: refusing to hide, refusing to excuse, refusing to pretend. To look into the mirror of your own soul and confront the man staring back. To embrace the struggle of becoming more than you are. To stop being weak and start being real. The question Nietzsche leaves echoing in the silence is this: will you continue hiding behind the mask, or will you finally choose to become the man you were always capable of being? This is the truth, harsh, unforgiving, necessary. And it will follow you long after the applause fades, long after comfort evaporates, long after the world forgets. The mask will fall. The question is whether you are ready to stand without it.